Twitch and YouTube, hi. I still have the flu, so I'm kind of like, meh. But it's it is what it is. But how is everybody? Welcome, and we are reading. Oh, I've already had dinner. We had sweet potatoes with a whole lot of stuff on them, like basically stuffed potatoes. Um, and now it is cake and tea. I wish it was cake and beer, but here we are. Um, so, yeah, he brought me tea and cake. So, 2 weeks ago, when we picked up with Orientalism, we were talking about the Orient constituting a challenge to the West, but not just in terms of colonialism and resource extraction, but its idea of imperium, its idea of empire and superiority. So we pick up from there. After a good century of constant intervention in and the study of the Orient, the West's role in the East itself, responding to the crises of modernity, seemed considerably more delicate. There was an issue of outright occupation, mandated territories, the issue of European competition in the Orient, and the issue of dealing with native elites, popular movements, demands for self-government and independence. So that is where we stopped last week. There was the issue of civilizational contacts between Orient and Occident. Sylvain Levy, president of the Société Asiatique, we read a lot from him. He wrote between 1928 and 1935. Our duty is to understand Oriental civilization, the humanistic problem, which consists on an intellectual level in making a sympathetic and intelligent effort to understand foreign civilization in both their past and future forms. Is specifically posed for us Frenchmen, although similar sentiments could have been expressed by Englishmen, the problem was a European one, in a practical way with regard to our great Asiatic colonies. And this was essentially a claim that the West was not just superior, but they were given this right to rule the land because of their superiority, because of their supposed virtue, because of their supposed uncontestable intellect. And he said because it was laziness or incomprehension that the people of the Orient could not understand their own reality. So we get back into it. Levy has no difficulty in connecting Orientalism with politics, for the long or rather prolonged Western intervention in the East cannot be denied either in its consequences for knowledge or its effect upon the hapless native. Together, the two add up to what could be a menacing future. It did become a menacing future that does that bleeds into today. I mean, Palestine, Lebanon, Iran. For all its expressed humanism, this admirable concern for fellow creatures, Levy conceives the present juncture in unpleasantly constricted terms. The Oriental is imagined to feel his world threatened by a superior civilization. There is no fucking way. Like, people allergic to the sun honestly think that they're superior. His motives are impelled not by some positive desire for freedom, political independence, or cultural achievement on the people's own terms, but instead by rancor or jealous malice. The panacea offered for this potentially ugly turn of affairs is that the Orient be marketed for a Western consumer, be put before him as among numerous wares beseeching his attention. So, inviting into the Western consciousness how to consume the East, how to consume other cultures. How many of you wore like Bedouin outfits for Halloween, or like togas for dress-up parties and things like that? How many of you seen people who do not practice Hinduism wearing bindis on their forehead? Only during... The fact that a toga party exists is diabolical. Because other people's cultures are not costumes. How many little white girls have you seen dressing up as Moana? I want to read something to you that has such great importance to all brown girls watching Moana, but I'll read it after this. By a single stroke, you will diffuse the Orient, by letting it think itself to be an equal quantity on the Occidental marketplace of ideas. Ouch! And you will appease Western fears of an Oriental tidal wave. At the bottom, of course, Levy's principal point, his most telling confession, is that unless something is done about the Orient, the Asiatic drama will approach the crisis point. Asia suffers, yet in its suffering it threatens Europe. The eternal bristling frontier endures between East and West almost unchanged since classical antiquity. What Levy says is the most august of modern Orientalists, echoed with less subtly but by culturally humanistic terms. Item, in 1925, the French periodical, the Book of Du Mois, the Book of Les, conducted a survey among notable intellectual figures. The writers canvassed included Orientalists such as Lévy, Émile Sénart, as well as men like André Gide, Paul Valéry, and Edmond Jaloux. The questions dealt with the relations between Orient and Occident in a timely, not to say brazenly provocative way, and this already indicates something about the cultural ambience of the period. We will immediately recognize how ideas of the sort promulgated in Orientalist scholarship have now reached the level of accepted truth. How many of you thought it through? Thank you, Raiders! Thank you so much, H2 Oreos! Thank you so much, Molly. And thank you so much, Raiders. Yay! Welcome in. We are reading Orientalism. Thank you. And yes, we are on part 2 of chapter 3, which is the final chapter, talking about the brazenness with which the West has represented the Orient. So, any ideas? Like, what ideas do you have that it... I love that it's H2 Oreos raid. What ideas of the Orient do you have that were later in life proven to be absolutely incorrect? I was told my whole life, pretty much, that Arabic sounds violent. And so, like, I grew up with this idea. Everything is there is in a sepia tone, yeah? That's one thing that film tells us. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you, my love. We have, like I was told constantly that Arabic is an ugly language and it just doesn't have much depth to it. And I believed it for a long, long time. I discovered since that absolutely not. It is one of the most beautiful languages, such depth of meaning. One word can mean completely different things depending on the context. It is a stunning, stunning language. And it sounds beautiful too. It's not this guttural mess that the West kind of portrayed it to be. So that is what he is talking about right now, how the West, how the Occident held on to the narratives of the Orient, especially West Asia, and turned it into this beast that could that could be kind of like an opposition for the West. It is really pretty. Thank you, Geeky. But if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to ask. You can ask in the Discord as well. And yeah, welcome. And kick off your shoes, make yourselves at home, grab a blanket, grab a cup of tea. We are only 20 minutes into the reading. Yes, exactly. We are taught to not appreciate things that are considered the opposite. One question asks whether Orient and Occident are mutually impenetrable. The idea was metalinks or not. Another asks whether or not Oriental influences represented a grave peril to French thought. A third asks about those values in Occidental culture to which its superiority over the Orient can be ascribed. Valerie's response seems to me worth quoting from, so forthright, the lines of its argument, and so time-honored, at least in the earliest 20th century. To any Americans that can't point out Belgium on a map, don't worry. I got one for you. Oh, thank you so much, my love. From the cultural point of view, I do not think that we have much to fear now from Oriental influences. It's not unknown to us. We owe to the Orient all the beginnings of our art and a great deal of our knowledge. I'm surprised that they actually admitted that. We can very well welcome what now comes out of it, if something new is coming out of there, which I very much doubt. This doubt is precisely our guarantee and our European weapon. Beside, the real question in such matters is to digest. But that has always been, just as precisely, the great speciality of the European mind through the ages. Our role is therefore to maintain this power of choice, universal comprehension, the transformation of everything into our own substance, powers which have made us what we are. Theft. It's just theft. The Greeks and Romans showed us how to deal with the monsters of Asia, how to treat them by analysis, how to extract them from their quintessence. The Mediterranean basin seems to be like a closed vessel, where the essence of the vast Orient have always come in order to be condensed. Eek. Thank you. Why I say eek is it's so disgusting. How can you sit there and write things like this about about people? I don't get it. Back to Saïd. If European culture generally has digested the Orient, certainly Valerie was aware that one specific agency of doing this job had been Orientalism itself. In the world of Wilsonian principles of national self-determination, he relies confidently on analyzing the Orient's threat away. Yeah, it is a flash call. Sorry, B. The power of choice is mainly for Europe first to acknowledge the Orient as the origin of European science, and then to treat it as a superseded origin. Like we already knew this stuff, we were just confirming. Thus, in another context, Balfour could have regarded the native inhabitants of Palestine as having priority on the land, but nowhere near the subsequent authority to keep it. The mere wishes of 700,000 Arabs, he said, were of no moment compared to the destiny of an essentially European colonial movement that was Israel. Oop. Even the man who gave the land to the Zionists was like, yeah, this is a colonial project. Asia represented then the unpleasant likelihood of a sudden eruption that would destroy the quote-unquote our world, as John Buchan put it in 1922. The earth is seeing with incoherent power and unorganized intelligence. Have you ever reflected on the case of China? There you have millions of quick brains stifled into trumpety crafts. They have no direction, driving power. So the sum of their efforts is futile, and the world laughs at China. Are we laughing at China right now? Who's laughing at China? Is the joke about China in the room with us? But he says, if China organized itself as it would be no laughing matter. Yeah, like how we have it now. Europe's effort, therefore, was to maintain itself as what Valery called a machine puissante, absorbing what it could from outside Europe, converting everything into its own use. And that's essentially it. We learn what we can from everybody else, steal what we can from everyone else, absorb it into European knowledge and lexicon, and discard the people who invented it. Intellectually and materially keeping the Orient selectively organized or disorganized in many cases, yet this could only be done through clarity of vision. Unless the Orient was seen for what it was, in its power, military, material, spiritual, would sooner or later overwhelm Europe. The great colonial empires, great systems of systemic oppression, existed to fend off the feared eventuality. Colonial subjects, as George Orwell saw them in Marrakesh in 1939, must not be seen except as a kind of continental emanation. He says African, Asian, Oriental. When you walk through a town like this, 200,000 inhabitants, of whom at least 20,000 own literally nothing except the rags they stand up in, when you see how people live, and still more, how easily they die, it's always difficult to believe that you are walking among human beings. All colonial empires are in reality founded upon the fact people have brown faces. Besides, they have so many of them. Are they really the same flesh as yourself? Do they even have names? Or are they merely a kind of undifferentiated brown stuff about an individual as bees or coral insects? They arise out of the earth, sweat and starve, and then sink back into nameless mounds of graveyards, and nobody notices they are gone, and even the graves themselves soon fade back into the soil. That's George Orwell. How many of you like him? Yeah, his work is important, just as Rudyard Kipling is, just as Charles Darwin's was. Thankfully. Thankfully, he never met me. All of these leaders, all of these writers. Thank you. All of these writers, all of these leaders, all of these people who history would have us see as great men of our time, or great men of their time, or whatever the case may be, they're all just racists. All of them. Every single one. Aside from the picturesque characters offered European readers in this exotic fiction of minor writers, like Lottie, Marmaduke, Pickethall, the non-European known to Europeans is precisely what Orwell says about him. Either a figure of fun or an atom in vast collectively designated, an ordinary or cultivated discourse, an undifferentiated type. Whew. The type called Oriental, African, yellow, brown, Muslim. To such abstractions, Orientalism has contributed its power of generalization, converting instances of civilization into ideal bearers of value, idea, position, which in turn the Orientalists found in the Orient, transformed into common cultural currency. And that cultural currency is when a person looks at us and says, "Come with me," at an airport. Or, "May I see your other paperwork, please?" When we are walking around London. Or in offices when somebody asks, "Where are you really from?" That is the cultural currency we are reduced to. If we reflect that Raymond Schwab brought out his brilliant biography of Anquetil Dupérion in 1934 and began those studies, which were to put Orientalism in a proper cultural context, we must remark that what he did was in stark contrast to his fellow artists and intellectuals, for whom Orient and Occident were still second-hand abstractions. Not that Pound, Eliot, Yeats, Arthur Waley, Fenollosa, Paul Claudel, Victor Selegan, and others were ignoring the wisdom of the East. Muller had called it a few generations earlier. Rather, the culture viewed the Orient and Islam in particular with the mistrust with which its earned attitude to the Orient has always been frightened. My family has lived here for 7, now 8 generations. We still get asked that question. 1860. Where are you really from? My guy, I'm from Durban. Any questions? I'm like, Illinois, what do you want? Exactly. Okay, Twitch and YouTube. I will be back in a minute. Welcome back, Twitch and YouTube. Yeah, it is a thing of telling people that they don't belong because they don't fit what is historically the norm. And the idea that we need to be frightened of the unknown is something that the West has instilled in people for so damn long. Like, what is there to be afraid of? What exactly? Riddle me that. A suitable instance of these contemporary attitudes at its most explicit is to be found in a series of lectures given at the University of Chicago in 1924 on the Occident and Orient by Valentin Chirol, as a well-known European newspaperman of great experience in the East. His purpose was to make clear to the educated Americans that the Orient was not as far off perhaps as they believed. His line was a simple one, that the Orient and Occident are irreducibly opposed to each other, and the Orient in particular, or Mohammedanism, is one of the great world forces responsible for the deepest lines of cleavage in the world. His sweeping generalizations are, I think, adequately represented by the titles of his lectures. 1. Their Ancient Battleground. 2. The Passing of the Ottoman Empire. 3. The Peculiar Case of Egypt. 4. The Great British Experiment in Egypt. 5. Protectorates and Mandates. 6. The New Factor of Bolshevism. And 7. Some General Conclusions. To such relatively popular accounts of the Orient as Schirol's, we can add a testimonial by Elie Faure, who is in his ruminations draws, like Schirol, on history, cultural expertise, and the familiar contrast between white Occidentalism and colored Orientalism. While delivering himself of paradoxes, for unlike us, they have no conception of peace. That's a quote. Faure goes on to show that the Oriental's bodies are lazy. The Orient has no conception of history, of nation, or patriation. That the Orient is essentially mystical, and so on. All of these myths that were, as we've seen earlier on in the book, planted in the minds of Europeans, or the West in general, by early Orientalists. He argues that unless the Oriental learns to be rational, to develop techniques of knowledge and positivity, there can be no rapprochement between East and West. A far more subtle and learned account of the East-West dilemma can be found in Fernand Boldensberger's essay Où s'affondent l'Orient et l'Occident intellectuel. But he too speaks of an inherent Oriental disdain for the idea of mental discipline and for rational interpretation. And my throat is getting scratchy, so that is where I will stop for today. Any questions? Please remember that I do these readings for free, so if you can contribute anything to the goal, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. And I'm going to say no Kiara, no Justin. If you have any questions, you can always get hold of me on either TikTok or Yes You, because you have a house to fix and you've done so much for me already. You can hit me up on Discord, or you can find me in anyhow through my link tree. Thank you so much, my love. Yeah. Great minds think alike, Justin. And as always, remember to, I was going to say drink your meds and eat water. Eat something if you haven't today. Drink water, take your meds. Remember to smash the motherfucking patriarchy, eat all the white men. And if you don't eat meat, compost them, because we feed our oppressors to the land. And remember to be kind, especially to yourselves, because everybody deserves kindness, including you. You can find all of my links in my link tree if you want to support me in any way. And take your eats, med your drinks. Yes. And I'm going to be back in the server if you want to join our Discord server. The link to the Discord is also in the link tree. And there you will also find a whole lot of other links to causes that you can support, including the Proletariat's Discord, the Lighthouse, where mutual aid is at the center of everything that Crow does. So yes, you can find all of those in the link tree as well. And Knowledge, if you are still here, please message me. Yeah, and you can, in the server, you'll have access to things like the library, which has got more than $30,000 worth of books in there. Resources for the reading groups, disability and queer library, and also what we call literature because the men can't find it, which is some smarty writing. I am going to work on my thesis, so I shall see y'all tomorrow for this book right here, Abolition Feminism Now, by Angela Davis, Gina Dent, Erica Mayners, and Beth Ritchie. I shall see y'all then. Bye.